My name is Stanislaw Robert Luberda, and this is my free Premiere Pro introductory class, Lesson 5. In Lesson 5, we're going to be talking all about the basics of editing. That's once we bring our clips in, start cutting them up, and putting them on our timeline. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about in and out points, creating subclips and organizing our clips, and the importance of handles. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm going to want to do here is once I've created my project, which we've covered in Lesson 2, we want to go ahead and import my media. So I'm just going to double click here, and I've already created some folders here of music, photo, and video. In here I've got some photos I took while I was in Thailand and in Shanghai, and I have some video from the same places. I've got some music here from Podington Bear. He's got a great website there with some production music that has different licenses, so be sure to check that out. What I'm going to do is, instead of importing the individual items like I've done in the past, I'm actually going to go ahead and import these whole folders. Once I go ahead and import those folders, you'll notice that after it's done processing, it will pop up right in my project panel. And inside here, I have all my photos, my music, and my videos that I have in here. In the past, what we've done to create a new sequence is we've gone up to either File, New, Sequence, or we've gone over to this Create New Item sequence here. And instead, what we're going to do this time is actually use one of our pieces of footage here to create our timeline. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to look for my video info panel, and I'm going to decide now what size I want to make my video panel. Now I have lots of different kinds of clips in here. You'll notice that I have some in 1920 by 1080. I have some that's at 1280 by 720, and just a couple here that are 640 by 360, 480 by 360 as well. The reason why I have this is if I do something like this, I have this piece of footage here that I shot in James Bond Island here in Thailand in Phang Nam Bay. And if I drag this into my sequence here, it's going to make a sequence that is this size, 3840 by 2160. That's great if the rest of my clips are that size. But since I have different sizes here, if I drag, say, this clip here from iHeart Shanghai, shot this at an Airbnb that I stayed at, and I drag that into my timeline here, just like I did before. So I'm just creating another clip, and I'll put that to the end of my timeline. Well, now when I play this back, my next clip is not going to fit because they're two different sizes. So I'm going to hit Command Z and just undo those so I don't have a sequence anymore. That is one of the reasons why you might want to make your sequence first. If you know what size it's going to be, then it's no problem. I can just come into here and grab this clip, which is 1920 by 1080, and drag this to create my sequence. And now my sequence is going to be 1920 by 1080 at 44.1 kilohertz at 30 frames per second here, because everything else is going to match that. Usually you want all your clips to have the same frame rate, and you want them to all have the same size here as far as resolution. There are times that you're not going to want that. If, for example, I have this particular clip and I drag this into my timeline, it's going to do the opposite of what we saw, and it's going to be very zoomed in. And that's because I have the extra resolution in this 1080. So this is the 4K image, and this is the 1080 image. And that's why a lot of different videographers will shoot at a higher resolution than they're actually exporting. It's the same that happens with print. If you have something that's going to go for print, typically it's going to be at a very high resolution, and then they'll save down a version for the web. You can always go smaller. You can't necessarily make something bigger out of something smaller. We have a number of clips here, and now I have a sequence. Notice it named my sequence whatever clip I dragged in there. So that's another reason why we may want to just create our sequence so we stay organized. I'm going to go ahead and delete that sequence here. And we just have our 3 folders here. And I'm going to create a new sequence just like we saw before. And I'm just going to call this one Lesson 5 Edit. And so I have a 1920 by 1080 at 2997. Now we can go ahead and start editing our project. You'll notice if I open up my video window, I can't really see a lot that's going on until I double click my items here. There is a separate button we can use, which is down here in the bottom left corner. We have either our list view or our icon view. If I switch to my icon view, here's where things look like here. And if I double click this video, this is my same folder, it's actually going to open up in a separate panel. And now what's happening, it's giving me little thumbnails of my clips that I can preview before I drop them into my timeline. What's really great about this is I can actually hover scrub over these, and it's giving me a short little playback so I can see what is happening in these clips. So in here I can actually rearrange my clips and create something called a storyboard edit. You'll notice that I have lots of different clips though. That's very common for me. Usually I'll have maybe hundreds, if not more, clips to actually organize and go through. Now that can be really daunting when all my clips have names like IMG 9516, something that just says Thailand S001 001 38. It may be a little hard to actually organize all my different clips. Depending on what you want to do, you may want to use your icon view or your list view. Typically when I'm editing, I actually have another monitor that I place one of these screens onto so that way I can easily see everything at once, very uncluttered. If you want to, you can actually grab this panel here and rearrange things and kind of shove things around here. So now I've just docked this panel by grabbing this tab, and if I want to remove it, I can hold on to Control and drag that off into its own freestanding tab there. And I'm just going to go ahead and put that back right in my project panel for now. So I'm looking inside my video bin. Here's my source monitor, and here's my program monitor. So now let's start looking at our clips here. If I want to just go ahead and start putting together a story, I have lots of different information that I have here. For example, here's the clip I shot, and if I hover over it, it gives me information about it. But what I care about right now is the duration here. So this is a 10-second and 29-frame clip, and if I hover over it, you can see I'm hovering over this clip here and it's playing back, and same with this one here. If I click on the clip, it stops hover scrubbing, and I can scrub through using this playhead. If I double click it, that's what's going to open up in my source monitor. And here is what I'm seeing is I'm at the 3-second and 6-frame mark of 10 seconds and 29 frames. I'm going to drag this into my timeline here. And when I do that, I'm going to get a quick little warning here. And the warning is telling me, hey, the clip I'm dragging in doesn't match the sequence settings I have exactly. If you remember when I created my sequence setting, it was at 29.97 frames. This particular clip is at 30 frames per second. In my case right now, my sequence is at 29.97 frames per second, and my clip is at 30 frames per second. That's fairly negligible, but because there is any kind of difference, it's giving me this warning. What this warning is asking is, do I want to change the sequence settings to match my new clip? Or do I want to keep my 29.97 and all the rest of the clips have to follow into that? So I'm just going to change my sequence settings for right now. And here I have the full 10-second clip. This was just shot at the airport in Shanghai, I believe. I can see that I probably don't want to use this whole clip. So I'm going to get rid of this clip here really quick. I'm just going to select it and delete it. And instead, what I'm going to do is just create a selection of about 3 seconds in my source monitor to bring in. So imagine that this is my whole reel of film. And as I'm playing this back, maybe I'm going to drag this to about here. And I'm going to hit the letter I on my keyboard to create an in point. I can drag this to about 3, 4, 5 seconds later, maybe right about here at the 5-second mark, and create an out point. Now if I drag this clip over, it's only going to have a duration of 3 seconds and 1 frame. The reason being is it's adhering to this in and out point. So I have a couple different ways that I can bring my clips into my timeline. I can drag them from here. I could drag them from here, or I can drag them into my program monitor. When I drag them into my program monitor, you'll notice I have lots of different options. We're going to ignore most of these right now except for this insert and overwrite. This insert and overwrite are our two basic tools that we're using when we're editing here. They also appear as these two buttons right here on our source monitor, our insert and our overwrite. One is our comma and one is our period. What exactly is the difference there? So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to drag this into my timeline here. That's really kind of hard to see, that 3 seconds. So I'm going to grab this tab here and scroll to the left, and that's actually going to zoom in my timeline there. So now I can see it's playing back 3 seconds worth. And we'll go to another clip. I'm going to switch to my icon view so I can review my clips a little bit easier. And I'm going to pick this clip right here. Pick another spot right about here using my I key and my O key. And I'm going to drag this again to the end of my timeline there. You'll notice as soon as I drag it to the end of my timeline, it wants to snap into place. That's by default. We have this button in our timeline here, which is a magnetic snap, and that's the shortcut key for S. If I have that off, notice it just lets me place it wherever I like. And if I place this on top of the other clip, it has now overwritten this clip. This information is still there. However, I'm just not using the full 3 seconds anymore. I'm only using 2 seconds and 15 frames. So if I drag this back off, now there's an open empty frame there. So I'm going to hit undo a couple times here. Command Z, and Command Z. I'm going to turn my snapping back on. And I'm going to go to the end of my last clip here using my up and down arrows. Up will go up or back a selection. Down will go down a selection. And I'm going to double click that again. And this time I'm going to press this button here or use my comma and insert it. Here's a quick little clip from walking around in downtown Shanghai. And I'm going to create another in and out marker. Maybe I want to place that right here. Now, if I insert this, what's going to happen is it is going to cut this clip in half, insert this new clip, which is going to be 1 second and 24 frames due to my in and out point, and then continue the rest of this clip. So as an example, here's what happens. An overwrite edit will basically take this clip and plop it right on top here. So if I click the overwrite, that overwrites anything that's in that specific layer. Something to be aware of with in and out points is you're limited to only one in and out point per clip. What that means is, can I go back into this clip here and choose a different in and out point? Well, yeah, absolutely. I can, let's say, go back to this I Heart Shanghai, and maybe I don't want to use this section anymore. I actually want to use this section and create a new in and out point. That hasn't changed this clip at all, but a new instance of this clip can be dragged out. You'll notice something else that's happened in my icon view here. On my clips, you can tell if it has audio and video, and then any video that's been used will highlight in blue. Now, if you're in older versions of Premiere Pro, it'll highlight in orange. And if I hover over this particular clip, it should give me information of how many times it's been used. So in this case, this particular clip has been used 2 separate times in my production. So this is a great quick way to look over all your different clips to decide what's been used or not. So here's my other 2 clips that have been used. And here's a whole bunch other ones that haven't. I briefly talked about how tough it can be to figure out what all these different clips are by name alone. A lot of times if I'm working with other people, it'd be great to have a quick, easy way to rename these clips. Well, if I double click onto the name, I can go ahead and rename it. I'm going to call this one the Chattachung Market. And now I know very clearly what that is. Now this hasn't actually physically changed the name of this clip. This clip is still img underscore whatever number it was. However, I've given it an alias within Premiere Pro. So if I right click this clip and I say reveal in Finder, it's actually going to take me to that clip, which is img underscore 9763, and I can see that that's still that same clip. When we're dealing with lots of different clips, there's times that we want to just organize our clips to just the specific pieces we want. Maybe I don't necessarily want to create an in and out point because I'm going to reuse this clip again, but I want to snip off just this section here and create a subclip. What a subclip is it's basically a shorter instance of this clip that we can use as its own piece without having to reference the rest of this media. So it's kind of like a locked in and out point. And to make a subclip, we can hit Command U, which takes us to make subclip, or we can go to clip, make subclip. And here it just says, what do you want to call it? Notice it takes the same name as what I've already named it, the Chattachung Market subclip 001. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now my subclip is only a maximum of 1 second and 7 frames. Notice that my original clip is much longer. If I clear this in and out point by right-clicking in it and clearing my in and out, I can see that my original clip is 4 seconds and 24 frames. However, in the subclip now, which has a new icon of an in and out with our video and audio, I can only access 1 second and 7 frames. I don't have a way to make that any longer. And so I can drag that right into my timeline as well. Now you'll notice that I place this on a second layer. And what that does now is it kind of cuts away just for that quick second. So why would I want to use these subclips? Well, it gives me a quick way to organize my material so that way I can say I want to use specifically these parts, and maybe I had several different takes of a specific scene. Well, I can go ahead and organize my footage to create lots of different subclips that I can easily navigate to instead of having to drill through all these different clip names over and over again to try and find the exact right clip. Another organization method I have is I'm going to click back on my project panel here and collapse these, is make a new bin, and I'm going to call it selects. And in my selects is where I'm going to go ahead and place my subclips. So if I go through the rest of this here and create some quick subclips, I can store them all in my selects. So I'm going to do that very quickly, and when we come back, you're going to be able to see what I've done there. Now that I've created a bunch of different subclips here, and again, we can see that these are subclips because they have the in and out bracket on the video, what I can do is start refining these clips a little bit further. If I want to go into just this folder, if I double click it, that's going to open up a new window. And that's not necessarily I want, because what tends to happen is I'll open up one window and another, and I've got all these different windows all over the place. What I can do instead is just hold on to the Alt Option button on my keyboard and double click this, and that'll actually take me inside that particular folder. You'll notice now I have this little up arrow here, so I can actually go up inside there, and I can double click that again, and that takes me back into here. However, this does open up additional tabs in here, so just be aware of that. I tend to just be able to like to go into one of these and be done with it. So now that I've got my different selects here put together, let's take a look at the editing process. Now I want to go ahead and I want to make a new sequence. I'm not necessarily going to be working with this sequence here anymore. So the first thing I'm going to do is really focus on just this panel here. These are my about 20 clips, 19, 20 clips here that I've put together. What I'm going to do is just arrange them in order by storyboard. So perhaps here we're going to start with this and kind of see that we're getting onto a boat, we're traveling by boat, catch some of the sights here. And then as we kind of pull up to these different areas, and I'm just arranging these clips. So we'll probably put this one over here. And a few more of these sites as we've traveled. Get rid of that guy. We don't need him. We've got 2 of him. That feels pretty good. That feels like a good kind of flow. If I want to make a new sequence with these settings, in the past what I did was I went to new item, create new sequence, or dragged one over here. If I know that this is the right size and format, I can just drag this to make a new item, and that actually creates a new sequence with the name of whatever clip I dropped in there. So I'm going to just rename this to Thailand by Boat. And there you can see there's my first clip. And I'm probably going to want to refine that a little bit more. Maybe I want to start this clip to right about here. And I'm just going to take my arrow selection tool and just drag my clip back. So now I have my clip starting at that one point and playing back. So now that I have that, I'm going to go ahead and start creating my in and out points. So if I create my in and out points and I use my insert or overwrite edit, that's going to drop it into my timeline. So I want to make sure that I go to the end of my timeline by pressing down. And I'm going to insert that clip there. Now you'll notice that it gave me this red line here. What that means is there's something different about this particular clip, and I don't have that information here right now until I hover over here, and I can see that this clip is at 24 frames per second, where this clip is at 30 frames per second. So there is some conforming that needs to happen here. We can ignore this for right now, but just be aware that to get it to play back correctly, we'll need to render this by pressing return. One last thing I want to talk about here while we're editing is the importance of handles. Handles become especially important when you have interview situations and perhaps someone is going to be saying something, they're right in the middle of a sentence. You want to make sure that you actually start recording before they start talking by about 3 to 4 seconds to give yourself a little bit extra room. Another way that I can just go ahead and start working with my clips is clear off my timeline. And because I've already put these clips in order, I can select my first one, hold on to Shift and select my last one, and actually drag them all straight into my timeline. And what that's going to do is just string them all one right after the other. If they have any in and out points, it'll honor them. Otherwise, it'll just put them all together. We're going to continue working with these clips, and even though some of these are larger and smaller, we're going to take a look at how we can use them effectively in our timelines by scaling them with effects, adding transitions, and I'll be adding some music as well. Now, music is not included in my download here. You will have to find some other music, but you can follow along and we can put together a short little story about my trip to Thailand. In the next lesson, we're going to be taking a look at transitions, how they work, how you can use them, and best practices. Again, my name is Stanislaw Luberda with the Introduction to Premiere Pro. See you in the next lesson.